Whole Man Academy. Because the world needs strong men. Whole Man Academy is changing the game for men around the world. It's for guys who want to live an epic life of fun and adventure, no matter what. We believe, deep down, all men want to go on their own hero's journey to becoming resilient, confident, fearless, and fulfilled. Listen in to be inspired by guys who don't settle for living a life of mediocrity. This is your call to action and call to adventure. Are you ready?
Okay, so this is the Whole Man Academy podcast, episode 91. My guest today is Blades Williamson, former city broker. We're going to talk financial markets. This guy has lived life with adventure and he's been on my list of people to talk to for a very long time. Mate, how are you and where are you?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me along to the podcast. I don't feel worthy, if I'm being honest, but I've seen some of your other guests, Navy SEALs and the ilks of that. But I presently am fantastic. I am presently in my house, which is in Los Angeles, California.
Lovely. So slightly different from working in the city or your upbringings. Well, first question was, and I meant. This is one of the big things about why I've written down about you'd lived in, you lived and worked in London and New York and, LA and Tokyo and what have you. So really lived a life of adventure. But first question was during, I always talk to a few of the guys that are part of the Whole Man Academy about who I'm interviewing. And one of them was like, where do you get the name Blades from? What a cool name. And I was like,
it's actually my middle name.
Okay.
Because, it's a family, I don't know, supposedly a bit of Scottish Viking stuff going on there years ago. I think one of my great-great-grandmothers was shagged by a Viking, and I inherited the name from there,
Got that off ancestry.com.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because ask about my name, because all my brothers have the middle name Blades as well.
Right.
And I started getting mid-teens, I think. It's almost a thing where it was like people were making fun of me with my name. Mm-hmm. And if I'm being honest, my middle name, and if I'm being honest, once I got into sports and especially got into the markets, it wasn't, from a business point of view, it wasn't the worst name to have.
Mm.
And, as you know, from the markets, nicknames are thrown around like,
yeah,
big M&Ms,
Yeah,
and
people love the nickname.
Yeah, my first day in the markets when I was 18, one of the guys said to me, who are you, sort of thing, hey, what's your first day at work?
Yeah.
It's 1979,
Yeah.
And who are you? And said, I'm Guy, but a lot of people call me Blades. And he just turned around and he said, listen, mate, just call yourself Blades because you're going to get a nickname and you might not like it. So go by Blades. And it kind of, from there, it was just Blades to the point where, to be honest with you, my mum would call up the office and say, is Guy there? And they goes, no, there's no one works here called Guy. And I mean, I worked for about 20 years, So,
but that's the joy.
Yeah, but then I got my brothers. I got my brothers' jobs. One of the benefits of being in the market back in those days. It was quite incestuous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I was able to get my brothers both jobs in the markets. And so one of them became my middle brother, who worked in the futures for quite a long time. He became Blades Junior, and my little brother, who's 6'4", 250 pounds, was Little Blades. So of course, then the junior got cut off, and the little gets cut off, and so there's all these Blades running around the financial markets in different areas of the world.
And what about the brothers remain in the markets as long as you did?
My little brother did. My little brother almost. I think he was close, and he only amazing. He only worked for one company. He was there for 30 odd years, and the same company, and blessed. We were very lucky.
Yeah, well, that's always impressive if people have stayed at the same. I mean, I started at Glencore when I was 18, which was a real baptism of fire because I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing. But some of the people,
after 34 years.
Yeah, and well, I would say it didn't get any better for me. But some people, were still there. And I was thinking, I worked at all the different companies at Spectron, GFI, I did shipbroking, all the different stuff. But those people that stayed at one company, I was like, for me, sometimes could have missed out on so many different experiences of going to different countries and kind of, either that or meeting different people. But now you kind of work through the ranks whilst going, let's say, around the world with the different markets, and you were high yield cash and credit derivatives broker, emerging market repo broker. Which one of those did you enjoy most? Which role?
So I started off in the I started off in the late 70s, 1979. I always like to top it. I actually worked in 5 different decades in the market. I started off in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I started off in foreign exchange. And the truth of the matter is, if you were on a good foreign exchange desk back in the 80s and early 90s, before technology hit in, it was a rush. It was open outcry. The reality is if you were on a good desk, you didn't stop shouting, from 7:15 in the morning until 5 o'clock. I would regularly go home on a Friday night, and I'd there were guys who had that, had to have that George Michael surgery, with the vocal cords and stuff. Oh, I'm serious. So guys would just lose their voices, and it was a rush. It was such a buzz. Emerging market bonds in the mid 90s during the Russian crisis, during when I was in the markets one day when some of the Russian bonds were trading, at 98 cents on the dollar, and at the end of the day they were trading at 30 cents on the dollar. It was just insanity. And a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And people ask me, do you miss the markets? And I don't miss the markets. I got out in 2014, just when it had sort of all gone sour. Technology had really kicked in. Things like credit derivatives had taken it in the seat of the pants. We were the reason why for the 2008 crash and all that kind of stuff, and which wasn't quite true. People ask me, do you miss the markets? And I say, I miss those, the markets back in the 80s and 90s.
The good days.
Credit derivatives in 2007, 2008 was fantastic. It really was. It was a buzz. I guess that was one of the problems. It was you had that high during the day, and
that was one of the things with
in the evenings, right?
Well, I was going to say, it's a bit like when I talk to footballers, and when I spoke to Neil Miller, how do you replicate scoring a winning goal at Anfield or wherever you are, and then when that's all over, how do you get that kind of high again? And that's when people say, when you venture out of a night, those are your options. But if you take us back to, as you say, because you were a young guy from Kent, and you kind of started in the markets, as you say, as a teenager, and then you went straight out to New York. Was that in '79? And what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's all a bit mad, really, when you look back at it, and you wonder why I ended up with a few sort of issues, So, like, no shit.
Yeah.
Fuck. No. So, I got in the markets when I was 18. I played a bit of rugby, although, the guys that actually played rugby would probably dispute that. But, and I was very lucky. One of the gents at my club took a liking to me, and kind of said, what are you going to do when you leave school? And I didn't have a clue. I had a few, maybe go to university and play a bit of rugby, or but that wasn't really a thing back then, And he said, I think you should come up to the market. So, and the reason I want to say this, because I want to, his name was actually, I'm not going to mention too many names during this. I don't want to incriminate too many people.
Yeah.
Jesus. But his name was Vern Williman, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was very senior at Bank of America. And basically, he just called up a man called Derek Tullett. Of the Tullett and Tokyo fame. Yeah. And the reason I'm saying this is Derek passed away last week.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and he was an icon in the market. He really was. He led the way for so many people, and he got a lot of people wealthy. Derek gave a lot of people a chance, and a lot of working class boys, lower middle class boys like me, a chance that would have never ever have. You forget in the sort of the 60s and the 70s. The city was. Pretty exclusive to public school boys and of that ilk, and boys from South London certainly weren't getting a chance. And people like Derek gave us a chance. So I just wanted to say that. So 18 markets were exploding. If you could drink and count to 10, you were in. I could definitely. I'd inherited my mother's family's drinking skills, and both a blessing and a curse, and. The drinking skills, and I could just about count to 10, CSE grade, mathematics from school, and actually I'm not doing myself any favor. I did the A levels and all that, school and the A levels, but and I was in the market literally like a year. The market was exploding and la da da, and they said, "Oh, do you want to go to New York?" And I just turned 19. I'm like, I'll go to New York. Why not?
Why not?
And grew up watching Kojak and Taxi with my mum, and I'd love to go to New York. And so there was, I was in New York City, 1981, I think it was. Living, in the Upper East Side in a company paid apartment, company credit card, and it was just crazy.
That thing with the expenses, I know we're going to get onto, which I found interesting. But what was it like for you when you first went out there? Because again, I'm guessing, had you traveled abroad at all before you rocked up in New York?
Traveled abroad. I was a world traveler. I've been to Benidorm 2 times, I think. Benidorm, I think I went to, I think we went on rugby tour to Amsterdam and France and a few places like that. But no, definitely not. We were very lucky as young kids. We had family vacations in North Wales in the Taliban caravan park, and went up to see my dad's mum up in Sunderland playing football on Roker Park Beach. Yes, when it was 55 degrees and sunny, where everyone would be half naked.
Yeah, so it's a slight difference from New York, and that's why I know you said about obviously working in London, New York, and like being in LA and Tokyo. That's one of the big things, if people can travel, is just broadening your horizons, because that just gives you that chance to experience things that when you're living in, be it Kent or wherever, you're just never going to get to. But so question here is, with the film Wolf of Wall Street, which I know a lot of people who don't know about the markets will have watched that and have understood some of it, because I still had guys say to me, "Oh, is that all ridiculous?" And I was like, "No, there was some crazy times, and it wasn't just the money, it was the drugs, it was the high." And I wondered for you, how much of the enjoyment was the camaraderie of other men? Because I know I miss that part of working on a broking floor. I don't miss the 5:30 alarm calls and the late nights and that shit. But having that group of guys around you, I found was great fun. So what about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking that question in that vertical with regards to Wolf of Wall Street. I thought you were going somewhere else there for a second. We can go down that path. But no, 1,000%. Listen, I don't mind admitting that since I retired from the markets, struggled is probably too severe a word, but it really is. And listen, I'm not comparing it to professional football or the basketball players out here, whatever, where they stop and all of a sudden, but it stops, and I was very fortunate. We were very fortunate. We bought a place out here during the crash in 2012 or whatever. Yeah. When real estate was still somewhat sensible. And my daughter finished school in London in 2014. She was coming to a college out here in America. And so we came out, and you're in the office, and you're obsessing, aren't you? And you've done it, right? You're obsessing. You're like thinking, I want to move to the Cotswolds. I want to have a farm. I want to have pigs. And I'm at the desk. I want to get to the beach in LA. I'm going to go paddle surfing in the morning. I'm going to work out in the afternoon, smoke cigars, in the evenings. And you get out there, and all of a sudden you go from, and if you include entertaining, we were working serious hours, weren't we? And like people talk about 50, 60-hour week. I'm like, no, man, I was doing 50 hours a week plus going out 3 nights a week. Yeah. Until 1 o'clock in the morning, and so you go from that sort of 60-hour, 70-hour week to all of a sudden you stop, and your mates aren't there. You don't have that banter on the desk. You don't have that, as you said, camaraderie. Yeah. And I remember coming on. It's like sort of a perfect day. I'd been down to the ocean. I'd been paddle boarding. A couple of girls come past in bikinis. Morning, Blades. And it's life is good. There's a turtle goes underneath your paddle board. Life perfect. And as I'm putting the ball back on the top of the car, I'm like, I just realized I've been in my head the whole time. And I went home and I said to my wife, I've got to do something. I'm going nuts. Yeah. And she was like, thank God for that. Because she went from never seeing me, God bless her, to me asking where we were going for lunch. Yeah, She's like, I know where I'm going for lunch. Where are you going for lunch? It's hard. It's a strange feeling,
and it's that also. I know, again, talking to either guys that have been in the forces or sportsmen, where it's that, what next for you. But I wonder, going back to the young guy, how could you explain to someone that hasn't got a clue what your average day was in the office? Because, like you say, it's early mornings. And for a lot of them, they probably think, well, what do you actually do all day? Which is a good question. I used to wonder sometimes what I did all day. But how would you describe your kind of average day as a broker?
Well, obviously it changed through the different decades, and, that's, be careful how I say some of this. But, the reality is what used to happen on the broking floors in the 80s would get you arrested now.
Yes.
You know, not because at the time you were doing anything legal. You weren't doing Wolf of Wall Street legal stuff. But the reality was, you know, back in the 80s, you know, and to a certain extent, early 90s, you know, the liquidity in the markets was provided by us, the brokers. And that's how you were sort of graded, whether or not you were, you know, a really top tier. Listen, I was never a top tier broker, but, you know, I got a game, you know, I was on the team sheet each week, but, you know, whether or not you were a good broker, you know, and, you know, the brokers provided the liquidity. So you'd come in the morning, get a slight feel for the market where it is and go, all right, here we go. And you would make up the first price.
Yeah, it's always a fun thing to do.
You know, you'd make up the first price and go from there. And it's I think it's one of those things, you know, my daughters, you know, went to colleges out here. And a lot of times they said, Dad, will you speak to, you know, Trevor, what do you speak to? Philip, he's in, you know, he's a business major. And, you know, I tell them old stories and they're like, wow, what, you know, and it was just different times. And we weren't doing anything wrong because everyone was doing it.
Yeah.
You know, everyone was doing it.
I guess at the time,
you make up prices, but obviously, you know, you get in and there was that sort of morning moment where you had your coffee and you know, you would try to get runs out of your account. You know, morning Frank, morning Dan, morning, you know, morning Timmy, and you know, what have you got? Anything? Can you start me off today? And there was, you know, a lot of sort of low grade begging going on.
Yes.
A lot of, and you know, obviously that's where the entertaining came in. If you'd entertain the guy out the night before, you know, there was a good chance, you know, if he liked you, he was going to light you up and start you off, and off you went. And but once again, different times for the different markets. And obviously, when the screens came in, you had to get the screen going. And when it was voice, you just needed that price that you could vocalize, you know, to all your accounts.
Yeah, it did. It did go through.
It was just rinse and repeat, though. It really is. There was nothing, you know, nothing. Listen, nothing too complicated about it. At the end of the day, it was two numbers. I don't care what, you know. I worked in an array of markets, but from a broker's point of view, at the end of the day, it was two numbers. Getting those two numbers, and you know, getting someone to buy or sell on those two numbers.
That was trying to explain to people, because I started off, or one, you know, my longest kind of role was actually doing carbon emission broking, and I didn't have a fucking clue what it was about, and I never did in the 8 or 9 years I did it. But my point was, you don't have to know a lot about the product. You need to know about the guys who want to trade it and the numbers. And it was about relationships. I was like, no one's here to test me on how much technical detail I can give you on carbon emissions. But if they know, you know, their book, and, you know, they know you're going to look after them, then they'll treat you well. So did you actually have much interest in the actual kind of the financial markets and the technicalities? Because I used to be a bit jealous of some of the guys I worked with who were really interested in it, and I just couldn't give a shit. So I wondered, did you just, as you say, it was just more the numbers to you, or were some of the markets a real actual interest to you?
No, some of them, since I've got out of the markets, since I've got out of the markets, they are of interest to me. At the time, it was just, I remember I went from foreign exchange, you know, which, listen, you know, at the end of the day, a 15-year-old can understand, you know, foreign exchange. And I went from foreign exchange into emerging market bonds. I did emerging market bonds. And, you know, all of a sudden you've got Brazil debt, you got this debt, and Peruvian and Russian, and, you know, different tranches and all that. And I completely psyched myself out. I'm like, you know, I went to secondary modern in Orpington King. I can't deal with this stuff. You know, my score was so good they knocked it down you know, years ago. You know, I can't deal with this stuff. And you know, I quickly reminded myself, it's, you know, it was two numbers and off you went. And you know, one of the best bits of advice I ever got as a young man was from someone in London, and, you know, whether it was the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, you know, if you're coming in on the tube or the subway in the morning, you know, buy that and just read the headlines. You know, you read the headlines, and that way, you know, if Timmy from Goldman said, you know, well, la-di-da, oh yeah, and you know, you spouse eloquently these, you know, 7 words that you read in the Financial Times that morning, and you'd sound somewhat coherent, somewhat intelligent, which in my case was always quite difficult. But it's
a good reminder, though, that you know, I knew plenty of guys, as I'm sure you did, that were in it because maybe they didn't exactly know what else they were going to do, or they got an opportunity because they thought they might make some good money. But you didn't have to be the best and most knowledgeable person. Actually, it was about your ability to be a good people person. And that's, for me, when we used to do interviews for desks, I'd be like, one of my rules is like, would I want to sit next to the guy, and would I want to go out for a beer with him? because they can be as clever as they want, but if they're boring as fuck, then you're just like, this isn't going to last very long. So for you, were you ever head of your desks, and therefore, because when you're head of the desk, you're not just being a broker, you're actually managing the desk as well?
Yeah. I ran, quite a few desks. I was in, especially, I kind of, I got back from Tokyo in '86, and I was put in charge of my first desk. And Christ, I think I was 25 or something. I don't know. And then proceeded to, listen. We're probably touching it later, but I was quite ambitious as a young man, and that's what kept my my drinking, my partying somewhat in control for for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I was quite driven, ambitious. I wanted to run desks. And absolutely, you go from that process where you're looking to hire people, you're looking to make the desk better, and personalities were key. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about the markets was that you had to fit those different personalities in. You couldn't have a bunch of white boys. You couldn't have a bunch of guys. All right, mate. And you had to sort of mix it up, and it was. It was kind of a bit of an art to put the pieces together, pieces of the puzzle together correctly. And I ran the graduate program in New York at one of my companies for a while. And when I got back to GFI, I helped out for a while. And it is. You look for personalities, but obviously the market evolved as well. The market evolved. And, I think back in the early 80s, and I might be doing myself and a lot of the other guys an injustice, there was a lot of us who were uneducated. I'll leave it at that. And, but we're quite good at what we did, and we got away with it. But I think, sort of in the mid 90s, and especially, from 2000 on, to even get a chance on the trading floor, you had to have gone to university. In America, you had to go to the right university. You can't just, you can't go to Staten Island Tech and get a job. And, it changed. Yeah. It changed. And which I think, and listen, because of the nature of the market now, what I'm going to say is irrelevant. But forget about brokers, some of the best traders I saw were guys from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Dippy, my mate Dippy, at Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. My mate Kevin Dennis, who died in 9/11, who's, he was working for Edco London when he was like 16 years old. At 23 or 24, he was probably the biggest spot cable trader in the world. And, and they just had that sense, they had that sense of what was going on. And they were driven, they were so driven. They hadn't, they didn't come from anything. Yeah. And they were driven and hungry. And listen, you only had to go down to the futures floor in London or the foreign exchange markets, when I'm in the money markets, and half the lads came from Loughton, the other half came from Bermondsey or Bromley, and it was we were very, very lucky to have. I'm very grateful. I'm totally aware that if it was present day market, so I'd be in Lewisham somewhere in the back office. I wouldn't have a chance, and that's a shame. That's a shame. It is.
Yeah, the game certainly has changed, and that was one. You touched on it earlier when kind of you felt like technology was taking over, and that was exactly the same when, with 3 or 4 years before I left the carbon emissions market, I could tell that the volumes we were doing were going down, and the volumes that the exchange were doing were going up. And you knew at some point that we'd go to somewhere close to zero. So I was already looking at how to pull the ripcord. But one of the big things for me was about, I didn't want to get into anything that I went into, but I was excited by the thought of making money, which, let's face it, is a big draw for a lot of people. So for yourself, starting at that young age, at what point did you feel like, not just, okay, I'm making some good money here, but I wanted to also talk about treating yourself, because I got told very early on, when you get a bonus, spend 10% of it on yourself, whatever you want, and save the rest, which I'm not saying I did that. But what was it like for you? Because that's at a young age to start earning, I guess, not just the basic salary, but the bonuses as well.
The reality is when I first started making, when I was 19 in New York, I was making, good money, for then.
Yeah.
For then, it was, and you got to realize, back in the early 80s, we were making more than professional footballers.
Can you remember what your first ever salary was?
I can. £2,000.
Right. Yep.
I'll tell you a funny story. £2,000, and I've been doing it for about 2 months. I was doing short date cable, and they used to have, in lunches. So in the office there was a kitchen, and they used to invite their clients, for in lunches. So the junior on the desk was, had what they called the barrel back then. So you would go out from 11:30 to 12:30. So I've gone out with this guy from 11:30 to 12:30. His name was his nickname was Somersault Sibley, because after a couple of drinks, he'd go all over the place. He just couldn't. He just, poor bless him, he just couldn't drink. He couldn't drink for life. So me and Somersault have gone down the pub 11:30 to 12:30, and this is how insane it was. Is if you knew you were doing the afternoon shift and you were doing the barrel, you go running down to the pub. The Sugarloaf and the Mansion House, you go running down, and literally, you'd see at 11:30, guys would be running down the stairs. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
Down the pub, and it wasn't uncommon to literally have 5 pints in and out. I'm 18, it's ridiculous. So Somersault's got on it. So we've gone back, and he had just come from a market where, without getting too technical, the prices were reversed, and it was one of those stages where I just had started grasping it. And I'm like, he started doing some trades and stuff. And I'm like, I think he's doing them the wrong way round. I got so full of fear, just terrified. And I've had to call up. So I've decided to call up the office upstairs and said, Jonesy, I think he's doing the trades the wrong way. And he's gone, Blades, I hope for your sake, you're right. But I hope for our sake, you're wrong. And he came down and I was right anyway. So they had to let him go. And the following day, I got a few lines and stuff. So Jonesy's come up to me. And he's gone, he goes, how much are you making? I said, $2,000. And he was like, he starts laughing, And, he turns around and he says, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you $5,000. And I was like a deer in the headlights. I was like, $5,000, it's like so much money at the time. It wasn't even funny. I'm like, what's going on here? And he thought I was like a little bit upset. It was only 5, and he goes, I'll give you 6, So and then you go to New York, and but in answer to your question is that especially early on, you had the cars and stuff, when I was in LA, I won't lie to you, when I was in LA and New York, the company paid for so much. They were very generous on their expense accounts. Once again, something that you wouldn't get away with now, and they paid for the apartment in LA, and but we managed to piss most of it away, if I'm being honest. Going up, as a sort of a 20-year-old, driving up to Vegas for the weekend, and going down to San Diego, going down to Mexico, and let's go to San Fran, and we managed to piss it most of the way, especially back in those days.
I guess also being out there, like you say, when you've got Vegas and places like that. I mean, even in London, there's plenty of opportunities to spunk money left, right, and centre. And that's why I laugh, because I saw today that the now former CEO of Credit Suisse, he's only been there for 9 months, but he's been let go for 1 or 2 various COVID protocol issues, but also that I think I read that he'd used the company private jet to go to Mauritius, which is always just makes me laugh, because there was so much, even in my day, of people with, there was so much money coming in, but often there was so much money coming out. So that was one of those big things. I find it interesting to talk money, not always about the figures, but that there was so much thrown about. And my example was, I remember I moved from one job to the other, and it was exactly the same role basically. And they said, what salary do you want? And I didn't know what I wanted. So I just doubled what I was on and thought, who knows? And they were like, okay, great. And you're like, what? And you're like, okay, so have I been undervaluing myself? Or am I happy that I've got that? And you can't wait to go and give your mum a call and let her know that you've just doubled your salary. So, because often people in, I say, normal jobs, they might get a small % pay rise each year, and that's what they're expected, and they're happy with it. And for me, I've been like, fuck that. Like, often in these, when you're in the city, I've seen people, go from 250 to $500,000 basic salaries in banks, and the banks don't bat an eyelid. So it's always interesting to talk about the money. But what was the first thing you treated yourself to that you'd consider a big expense? Like, would it be a car or watch or something?
Well, I think, especially in the 80s, and, especially before casual, I think, the market started to go down here when they introduced casual, casual.
Yeah.
I was one of the first in New York, wasn't they? Mickey went casual, all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd spend money. We used to get dressed up. You spend money on suits, fancy ties, fancy watches. Thank God I've still got some of the watches. Some of those watches have been some of the best investments I made. I got married quite young, mate. I got married and I had kids quite young. I was married when I was 26. First daughter, my daughter's in their 30s. And I got married young, and so my first treats were, we had some nice houses through the years, and I remember, when I came back from Tokyo and New York, and we had the first kid, and the second one's on the way, and you get the house in, the suburbs in New York, and you think, oh my God, how am I ever going to? It was a lead weight around you, and buying this big house that you probably shouldn't be getting, that you got lucky with eventually because the markets went up, real estate wise. But so yeah, sort of houses and stuff were my thing. I as crazy as I was, Ant, with my drinking and some of my other stuff later on in life, later on in my career, I was quite sensible with my money when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are, I don't know what your age demographic is that, be serious here for 1 second, is that, I was like sort of one of those guys that started mutual funds when I was in my 20s and stuff, and got the whole life insurance, and it was all a bit boring, really. But I definitely made up for that boringness with my craziness, entertaining and partying in the evening. So I was very much a Jekyll and Hyde, mate. I really was, and which is sort of, I'm sure some of your listeners might get. I was confused about myself for the longest time. I didn't know who I was, because I had the sensibility to start investing when I was, in my 20s, and being quite sensible with my money. But at the same time, once I put, that first drink in me on a, Tuesday night or whatever it might have been, I just couldn't stop. So I confused myself. I was like, what's going on here? Just couldn't understand it for the longest time.
That was one of the things I know when we spoke the other night, kind of have a pre-chat, and we said about at some point for me and you felt like you were wearing a bit of a mask as a man, because maybe you didn't know quite where you were trying to fit in, or if you were trying to prove things to people. But with that, I know you said previously that, sometimes you had that moment where you dreaded, like, on the way into work. So when the bell went or when the markets opened, you switched on, but that time in between, and I know not just myself, but plenty of guys that had that. I had a real sense of dread in the last couple of years of me going in. I used to hate being on the train, and there would be one bit of graffiti on the wall as I came into London Bridge. When I saw that, it's like it signaled the some level of sickness in my stomach, where I was like, I just can't do this any longer. But what about yourself? Like, because you were in the markets for so long, at what point did you think, I'm not sure if I actually want to be doing this all the time?
Well, same as that graffiti analogy you gave, as a trainee, as an 18-year-old, I remember, getting the train up from Orpington, and I get to New Cross. I think I used to stop at New Cross back in those days. And just thinking, I want to get out of the train. I want to go home. I don't want to do this. I can't do this. I'm shit. I'm not good enough for this. I'll never be able to get this. And I'm not lying, Ant, it never went away. It never went away. I did it for 34 years. Apparently I was half decent at it. When my contract was up, there was always, some opportunities. So, apparently maybe I did know what I was doing, but I just felt, I think they call it the imposter syndrome. I never, ever got over that. I never, whether it was, I share this and, it's that fear, isn't it? I share this in some of my AA meetings, that fear, and it never went away. And, whether it was getting out of a subway in New York, walking to the office, obviously the tube in London, getting out of the car in LA, or whatever in Tokyo, that walk up to the office and then getting up in the elevator, I was just so full of fear. And, they talk about Tom Hardy and all these guys doing, method acting. And fuck me, I was doing method acting in the 80s in the elevator. I'd literally try to psych myself. I'm not making this up, unfortunately. I would psych myself up. And it was one of those things, I was, in our markets, the bell didn't actually go off, did it? But, when the bell went off and the shit started going on, I was fine.
Yeah.
I was straight there, I was in it. And that fear went away. But, it's been a constant in my life. I remember playing sports when I was younger. I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be playing. Why did I get picked?
Yeah.
And fear, Fear's been, I realized it was maybe a big part of, why I abused, alcohol and other things.
Well, fear's so debilitating. I mean, look at, the media drive fear every day, and that it scares people. And, I see that from that side. But when I was working in the city, I felt the same, where I was, especially in one or two of the roles when I was new. So you were frightened to make a mistake because it was going to cost money, frightened to say the wrong thing. And that meant that you weren't being the real version of you because you couldn't relax. And I remember sitting in one role where I didn't want to do it any longer and trying to make myself I didn't realize at the time, but trying to make myself as small as possible at the desk, hoping that the phone didn't ring and no one would ask you a question. But apparently that doesn't make a good broker, especially when you're earning more than a lot of the people sitting around. Well, let's talk about coping mechanisms, because, we could talk, the late nights, alcohol, drugs, all that stuff generally for me got rolled into one. It was dangled in my face very early on. I mean, I remember going to a party in West London as a fairly young pup, and there was like bowls of cocaine on the table, and I didn't have a clue what I would do with it. And I remember, I think I sniffed a little bit of it and thought I knew what I was doing, and then just completely lost control of the entire evening. And that was the first time for me that I was like exposed to anything kind of that was out of the ordinary for me, of 12 Smirnoff Ice and 12 pints on a Saturday night. So what about yourself?
So it's one of those things, isn't it? Is that, I always, the partying, the drinking, I just for the listeners, I've been clean and sober for over 15 years now. And it's one of the things I share, is that the ironic thing for me is that, the drinking, in a roundabout way, provided my family with for the longest time, with a very, very nice lifestyle, nice houses, good schools. I was lucky enough to send my daughters to the fancy schools in London and the fancy universities in America, and, traveled. And a large part of that was down to the fact where I was out entertaining in the evenings, drinking, and making relationships, and so for the longest time, that whole thing worked for me. It worked for me. It was a means to the end. And if I'm being honest, and I share this, when I do shares in AA, is the reality is that I wasn't one of these guys who, had a drink or did my first drug and it was all went pear-shaped. It wasn't the case at all. It wasn't. I had a handle on it. And listen, a handle's too strong a way to put it. But it definitely didn't go pear-shaped straight away. I wasn't under Charing Cross Bridge, 2 weeks later. And I forged a career around it. And I don't know if I'm asking you a question here, but basically, with me, it was fun until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it became purgatory. I couldn't stop. Einstein, right? Einstein, insanity. Expecting a different result, right? You go out on Tuesday, and you spend the whole weekend. It's like, I'm not getting up to that next week. I'm not going to do it next week, And listen, near the end, I couldn't even make Monday. I was out Monday night, But come Tuesday, one of the lads say, "Hey, Blades, you fancy a quick one?" I was always amazed at those guys. Some of the Essex boys, Loughton, or the Chislehurst boys, "Oh, we'll catch the 604. I never fucking caught the 604 in my life. I'm not even close. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm going to catch the 604. I'm having two after, I'm having two, honey. And, I tell people, my wife called me up and say, are you coming home tonight? I've cooked, I've cooked pork chops. And I said, I'm coming home. I'd have passed one of those CSI Miami lie detector tests.
Yeah, you like course sign?
I passed the test. Yeah. I'm coming home, honey. Just I was leaving Rodders or someone goes, "Oh, Blades, you fancy a quick one?" Yeah, it's a great idea. I'll have two of them, I'll leave. Next thing I know, it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm fucking, I've done it again. Couldn't stop, mate. Powerless. That's what they call it, right? Powerless.
It's one of those, I saw so much of it, and I was the same, where I would never go for one or two drinks. For me, I was either out or I wasn't. There's no point in having two drinks, because if I wasn't drinking, I was at the gym, because I knew if I, the nights that I did go and hit things hard, if I complemented that with healthy eating and, as much gym action as I could in between that, it kind of kept a level balance. But yeah, those times where you'd be like, "Oh no, I'm just gonna pop out after work," and then suddenly it's 3:00 in the morning and you're in Movida or somewhere dancing with a £700 bottle of champagne or something, thinking, how the fuck have I got to here? And then you've got to hand your expenses in the next day and explain how you got that. So,
yeah, I mean, when I was in New York, and in 2003, I got asked to go to GFI London. Went to the London office, and I worked on this very, very successful, but absolutely like legendary desk. And it was like, I was almost like one of the sensible ones. I mean, like, I'll leave it at that. It was just, but these guys, in terms of broking skills, and they were good. And they dominated their market. We dominated the market at the time. And they would go out at lunchtimes, and there'd be literally three of us, like of an 8-man desk, there'd be like three of us left at lunchtime. And I think I got a bit of credit for being like disciplined and, like sensible for not going down at lunch. But I knew what I was like. I knew if I went down, I ain't coming back. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, look at me, I'm such a hardworking broker. I just knew, my limitations, my liabilities.
Yeah. And
exactly what you said. You put two in me. Then that's what confused me for the longest time. And that, how can I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not an addict. Mm-hmm. Look at my hair. I'm without sounding, I sound like a twat here, but look, I've got the car, look at the house, the kids go to the right schools, and look at, this isn't what an alcoholic addict looks like. And, it's not the case at all. And I would confuse myself, because regularly at weekends, I wasn't that drinker. I had to go have a drink every day.
Yeah.
I was binge, I would regularly go Saturdays and Sundays, not regularly, that's pushing it. But, it wasn't unusual for me to go Saturdays and Sundays without having a drink.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Come Monday or Tuesday, I was gagging for it, and near the end, as I mentioned before, that sort of Tuesday drink, I almost had to go out Monday nights. And, it's funny you mentioned Movida. I remember it was right near the end for me. It was, the party was over, and any joy I had from drinking had long gone. I was in purgatory, hated myself, so depressed, and, literally couldn't look myself in the mirror. And we're in Movida, and I was in Movida with, you might know him, Emma, you used to work with him, Roscoe.
Yeah. And
good-looking northern lad, and fantastic broker, great guy. And we're in Movida, and I turn around to Roscoe, and, I'm 46, right? I go, fucking hell, Roscoe, I think I'm the oldest geezer in here, but I'm the oldest geezer in here tonight. And he's gone, Blades, you've been the oldest geezer in here for the last 10 years. And it was just tight. It wasn't any romance or chillness or coolness. It had long gone. I had become quite pathetic, really.
That's where I wonder if you had any nights where they said you literally just didn't even go home because you just go straight back to the office. And, we had enough of those where, you either you came into office and maybe you tried to attempt to go to sleep under your desk or in your chair for like an hour, or whatever. But of course the automatic lights came on, and then you basically had a massive load of coffee, and, you were buzzing for a few hours whilst it got busy. But then for me, it was the afternoons would be painful, because you just wanted to go home, and maybe there was nothing going on in the market. So I would say for me, the boredom used to catch me sometimes as well, because you might do a great deal in the morning and make loads of money. So you didn't have to really try for the rest of the day, but you'd sit there and you had to stay there till 5 o'clock. So did you ever have that where it was a level of boredom as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you get some of those Facebook, I don't answer them, but you see something, did you ever go out one night and go straight to work? And it's like, duh, who didn't?
Yeah.
But, obviously, just some of those crazy situations where on a Friday afternoon in the office where, once again, I'm sure some of the guys would just, recoil from the hot flame now if they even thought about it. It's just like, half the guys asleep under the desk, and the boredom, I think, that's why you always wanted the markets to be busy, didn't you? When there were some downtimes, and obviously some desk, just the instrument you were doing, meant that you weren't shouting and screaming the whole time. And, I wasn't too sure what the question was, if I'm being honest now, but no, boredom, and listen, I mean, I think some of the young lads who work in the markets now would that's when half the desk would go down the pub if nothing was going on. It was like, what are we doing? Let's go down the pub.
What about expenses then? Because expenses was always one of those where, I had some issues sometimes when you rolled in the next morning and you had like a toilet roll type receipt, and you're like, where was this, and who are you with? So I always love hearing about comedy of people's like large expenses the next one. Did you have any one of those where you come in and you're like, I've got a enormous bill here and I'm gonna have to put this one through?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of things in the markets right back then that upper management could get away with, and it was turning a blind eye to maybe some of the expense accounts. It was turning a blind eye to maybe some of the things that were really going on in the evenings. And the reality is that back in our day, back in my day, is that and it sounds so crass, but if you were making good money for the company, it got signed. And, certain stories that might come out were just unheard. You didn't say, what? No, whatever. I don't want to know. And he's had a good morning today, leave him alone. Look, see how much business he's done with Citibank today.
Yeah.
Leave him alone, And that was very much the case. I mean, funny enough, when I came back in 2003, I won't mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but my top 5 brokers I ever worked with, the guy was just borderline genius, and when he was on form, but he loved he loved to drink as much as I did, and definitely pushed the envelope, and he definitely pushed the envelope with vacations. Right. He had a house in America and would go back on his golf trips and his gambling trips, and he pulls me into the office. We were briefly, before my wife and kids came over, because my kids are still had to finish school in New York. And so we were living together, we were drinking together, like 7 days a week. We were both nutty as each other. And he goes, I want to have a chat with you later. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? Let's have a chat. No, that's serious. And he's one of the bosses, but he never used his office. He thought that was for, the sort of, no, I'm a guy who sits on the desk sort of boss. And so he said, well, let's go in the office. And he goes to me, you're killing me. I said, what do you mean I'm killing you? We were doing really well in the markets. And, the couple of accounts that he'd given me, I was doing quite well with, And I said, what are you killing me? We're making loads of money here. He goes, no, not that. You're making me look bad. And I said, what do you mean you make me look bad? He says, I need you to start spending more on expenses and take more vacation. And by the way, I was spending minimum £10,000 a month. This is 2003. Yeah. I was spending minimum £10,000 a month. That's before, Chelsea tickets, Elton John tickets, flights to Ibiza. That it wasn't like I was spending 400 quid a month or whatever. Yeah. And that was it. And as long as you were creaming it, I guess is the best way to put it for the company. A blind eye was taken. But obviously, when companies started to go public, more and more that kind of changed overnight almost. Where and rightly so. Rightly so. You had to have why are you going out with this guy? And
Yeah, the fun went out of it. I felt at that point for me because it became very kind of regimented, and the bank said you can't spend this on these people, and you have to have receipts for everything. But I remember reading about one of the guys who'd actually paid for his client's extension on his house in expenses, and tried to put that through. But as you say, if someone's giving you thousands, or millions of pounds in revenue, then you're not going to say no. So I know plenty of guys who had that where the next morning you wake up and you open your wallet and you're like, shit, where did this come from? And you slope up to your boss and like, I was out with whoever last night. And they're like, were you? Go, oh yeah, fair enough. But now, question, what was it like for you when you became a dad? How did life change?
So you're asking me a question. I need to be honest with the viewers. Where I have a hard time remembering what I have for breakfast these days. So you're asking me something. My oldest daughter's 32, 33, and I was. It's funny, right? I've been married 34, 35 years. I might get a clip over the head in a minute for not knowing exactly what it is. And I've been with and I dated my wife for, I met her in Redondo Beach in California in 1982, I think it was, 83, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I knew I liked her, she was different. You know what I mean? It was the early 80s where pre-AIDS, where especially in America, where you met a bird in a bar and you had the English accent and the American Express card that the company was paying for, and it was going on. you know, for years I thought I looked like Brad Pitt, but I realized it was just the fact that I had a slight English accent and a company credit card. It had nothing to do with my looks. But you know, and yeah, I just knew, you know, I was in love. Like, oh, I like this bird, you know, and we've been dating maybe like 2 months or whatever, and you know, she remembers this. You know, I turned around to her and said, you know, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. She was, God knows what she thought I was going to ask, and I said, do you want kids? And she said, yeah, I do. And I was like, oh, good.
Yeah.
And because, you know, I knew that even back then, I knew she was the one, you know, as young as I was. And if she'd have told me I don't want kids, I'd have moved on, you know, and it's something I always wanted. And it's everything, man. You know, the relationship I have with my daughters, my middle daughter's visiting from Boca with her boyfriend now. My eldest daughter, who was living in New York, you know, Manhattan pre-COVID, her fiance have just moved out to LA, and my youngest daughter is in San Francisco, and it's everything, isn't it? You know, it's one of those things. Until you have kids, you can't express it as I am not now eloquently. And I think, you know, with me, with the kids, is that, you know, I look back in horror, massive regret. You know, there were times when, as many times I was out entertaining, there was times I was out because I was just out.
Yeah.
And, you know, my wife kept the family together. She, you know, she had that stability for the family when I, you know, wasn't around. And, you know, sorry, I'm going all over the place here. I just want to be honest with everyone. That's all.
Yeah.
You know, I became a bit of a weekend, you know, that weekend sort of parachute dad where I'd coach all the teams and I desperately trying to make up for being away all week, you know, right. And it's one of the blessings of being getting sober. Without a doubt, it's the greatest blessing for me. Number one is, you know, my wife. You know, we're still together, and you know, she stuck by me. Would have been a lot easier maybe for her to leave me. She saw something in me that I didn't see, didn't know. She saw something in me as a father, and be forever grateful for that for her. And you know, the relationship we're having with my daughters now. I got sober just in time. I got sober in 2006. I think my oldest was 14, 15 maybe.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just that stage where they, you know, didn't know exactly always out all the time. And I wasn't one of those, you know, guys that, you know, they never saw me, and I got home so late, and because I didn't get shit-faced at weekends and stuff, they never really saw me drunk.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm so grateful for getting sober when I did, because, you know, the relationship I have with all my family members, you know, my brothers, my mum, my relationship with my mum, you know, definitely got better, you know. It's yeah, listen, you know, when my daughters went to university, you know, I got phone calls from them. You know, Dad, I'm drinking too much. What should I do? And you know, it's unbelievable. You know, that they will call me.
Yeah.
You know, it's obviously, you
That's
know,
nice,
17 years ago. You're the last I'd be the last fucking person anyone would want to. It's
That's nice though.
It's a journey, isn't it? It's a journey. You know, like as I said, I look back in horror.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things I did and some of the things.
That's one of the things with, you know, I often get asked about, do I miss working in the city? And again, I miss some of it, but I realized, you know, I used to get the 6:07 train every morning. So I would never have seen my kids in the morning. And I used to get home, you know, either at 6-ish if you left work on time, or you'd be out with clients a couple of nights a week. And then of course you'd be, you know, I'd be through at the weekends with clients, or you'd go skiing with them, or you'd go to football matches, which took up a whole of a day or a Sunday. And I realize now, you know, I pretty much have breakfast, lunch and dinner with my kids every single day, give or take. And I realize if I'd worked in the city, I would hardly have seen them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it is, isn't it? It's a catch-22.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. And, you know, with myself, I didn't know any better, you know, and to be fair, you know, I could see someone who never worked in the city, or, you know, someone who's, you know, maybe has the occasional sherry at Christmas, thinking, you know, what's going on here? What's this all about? This is like growth. And it was one of those things that, because everyone else around you's doing it. And, you know, everyone you know, that thirst for success, that thirst for money, and it's just everyone else is doing it, and you know, from 18 on, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And you don't know any different, and you know, and it's one of those things where, you know, I remember, I think it was late 90s, and I know now it was a nervous breakdown. I had a nervous breakdown. I didn't know what it was at the time, and to the point where I couldn't pick up a phone. You know, I just friggin' for like 2 weeks, I was a mess, and I'm like just thinking, yeah, I've got to get out of the market. I've got to quit. You know, I need to get out of the markets. This is ridiculous. I'm killing myself. What am I doing? And, you know, all of a sudden you realize, oh, I've got the mortgage to pay, the credit cards bills, the kids have got to go to, you know, going to the school. And, you know, it just becomes on that roller coaster that you just can't get off.
Yeah.
And it's so hard. You know, someone like yourself, I'd give you so much. Listen, I didn't get out. I got out when I was 54 and, you know, I had a good run. You know, someone like yourself, you know, massive respect, you know, for having the intelligence, the gumption, and the you know, the wherewithal to get out. You know,
I think some of that also, you know, I think I was lucky with the timing. If I'd have been, you know, we didn't have kids until I was I 30? I can't even do my sums now, but you know, in my late 30s. So I wonder what I would have been like. So I would say I had a more level head at that point, and I'd, you know, grown up a little bit. But I'm not sure if I'd have had kids in my 20s, how I'd have been able to juggle, you know, trying to keep family happy, see kids and that kind of thing, plus juggle your own health, because, you know, in between all that, you've got to take care of yourself. And that was probably coming on to my last question for you is, you know, since you left working as a broker, I know you obviously you'd stopped drinking as well, but how did you take care of yourself kind of physically and mentally?
So, you know, it's one of those things, right? And don't worry, I'm not going to go away, you know, Alcoholic Anonymous on you. But, you know, it's one of those things you first get in, we call it the program, you know. You know, I didn't go to rehab, you know, I started attending 12-step fellowship meetings. Right. And, you know, if you're, yeah, something I like saying, you know, if anyone, you know, would like to contact me and, you know, what I did and, you know, get any kind of advice on if they've just had enough with the drinking and everything else and the drugs, you know, I'm definitely, I'm here to help. Yeah, but you know, it's the, you know, they call it, it's a part of the book, you know, alcohol is just a symptom, you know, and, you know, what we don't realize is that, you know, whether it's alcohol, whether it's Coke, whether it's gambling, whether it's women, whether it's shopping, whether it's, you know, whatever the, you know, your addiction might be, you know, we're trying to, you know, we're trying to mask, and we wear these masks, aren't we? You know, it's either fear, anxiety, depression, and we're trying to change the way we feel. And so you get into the program, and first of all, you know, you just don't want to do what you've been doing. You just want to give it up. How do I stop? And after about a year, you stop, and you know, you kind of, you're not, every time you go past the pub, you're not judged, and you go in and, you know, think there's a change, there's a mental change, and you know, you're not obsessing. It's that obsession, right? You know, that sort of, you know, oh, who's going down? Who's, you know, we used to joke about it, you know, like Thursday, oh, who's going out tonight? You know, and, you know, thought it was all camaraderie, but reality, it was obsession. You know, you're obsessing about going out on the Thursday, getting on it, you know, and getting up to, you know, creating carnage. But there's so much more to it, you know, and, you know, simple principles in life, you know, being honest, you know, just being there for people, you know, actually listening, you know. You know, I remember, like, you know, being at the water cooler or the coffee thing, and, you know, like, you know, saying to, you know, you meet someone who's on another desk, oh, mate, how's it going? How's the family? You know, but bollocks, you know, you don't care about the family. You know, it's just idle chat, and you're not listening. You know, you're always thinking about what I'm going to say next. It's all about me, right? You know, what's in it for me? And, you know, that just changed your perception, you know, the changes you know, the way you know, the principles in life, and just being a better person, you know, just being a better person, someone that, you know, people can trust, love, rely on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, yeah, for me, listen, it's been a gift. Sobriety for me has been a gift. You know, spiritually, I you know, I am, you know, what they call in the program, originally an agnostic. You know, I didn't come running into the, you know, God is everything kind of thing. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? And, you know, it's a God of your own understanding. You know, I have a God of my own understanding now. You know, funny enough, it's my sort of New Year's thing is I'm trying to sort of, what's the right word to use? increase my spirituality is definitely the wrong way to put it. That's my secondary modern education literature words coming out. But yeah, I'm trying to expand my spirituality, meditating. I've always, I was the, I was always the fittest pisshead out there. I would, for years I would, I'd do Ironmans and marathons and, ultra marathons, and so look, I can't be an alcoholic, I can't be an addict. Look, I just ran 50 miles.
Yeah, look what I can do. Yeah,
look what I can do. And so yeah, exercise is huge for me. It's it releases those endorphins that I need, yeah, I found if I'm, once again, I found that since I've been, retired. I had some interest in sort of the recovery field for a little bit, and been out of that now for about 2 years, I guess. And I think we all need a purpose. And, I'm 60 years old, and listen, financially we're going to be fine. And I joke around. I could be Bill Gates and have financial fear, but so I'm terrible. But I think we all need a purpose, and it's so having a purpose and I'm just very grateful. I know I use that word a lot. I'm just very grateful I got sober when I did. And but at the same time, as I said before, for those those years in the 80s and 90s, I had a lot of fun as well. It wasn't it wasn't all dark. It wasn't all dark. And by the way, you started off with the Wolf of Wall Street, and just for everyone's record, they wouldn't have even got a game with us. They wouldn't have even been on the substitutes bench.
Yeah.
But what's he doing now? He's a life coach now, isn't he?
Fuck knows. I know.
Life coach, he makes loads of money on YouTube being a life coach.
That's it. Does his motivational talks and stuff like that, and teaches people. So it just shows you can all reinvent yourself at some point. But no, that's why I find it really interesting to talk to you, because for me, it's like I fell into being a young trader and then a broker, and enjoyed quite a lot of it, but realized early on that it wasn't something I could do for many a year. But like you said, it was a lot of fun. And that's one of my highest values is fun. If it's not fun these days, I'm not really getting involved in it. So often people say, what was it like? And I'm like, most of the time it was good fun, making money, the camaraderie, once I'd got in the door, that was all right. But someone suggested maybe I've replaced all the podcasts, replaced what I was missing in the city with podcasts, because now I get to speak to interesting men around the world. But I get to do it without getting up at 5:30 every morning, to be honest. But and what's your plans the rest of today?
Rest of today is my daughter's in town. I might have a lunch. I went for a run this morning, and I'm doing some sort of side work for a friend of mine. So I've got a few things to do this afternoon, and so that's nice. And it's 65 and sunny here in LA. So
we'll take that.
Life is good. It's funny, coming from obviously South London, Orpington, but it's like when I first moved out here. Me and my wife, when we were dating in the 80s and lived on the beach, wake up the weekends, what do you want to do today? And, it'd be January and it'd be 70 degrees. So let's go to the beach. Yeah. Because as an Englishman, you think this is going to be the last sunny day ever. Yeah. And, it's sunny and 70 every day.
Could do with a bit of that now. I mean, today up in the Cotswolds, it was like -3 last night. And the most exciting thing that happened today was that there's a mole in our garden. So, the chickens are all over it. It's very different from working in the city, to be honest. But look, I'm going to let you go.
It's a lot better to me.
It's a lot more relaxed. I'll put it that way.
As we said before, the city isn't the city. It's not.
Yes.
I still got, some of the younger lads I used to work with, they're still doing it. And for every one guy I speak to who's who's doing all right, the other 9 are hanging on. It's that's a really good point. The glory days have changed. Obviously, they're moving into different verticals now. So yeah,
that's same for me. Some of the guys I still know that are maybe sitting at the same desk that I left, 5 years ago, and they'd been on that desk for a long time. And do you know the sad thing is, because most of them want to do something else, but they don't know what to do, or they're tied into the money and the lifestyle, which I totally understand. I had to make some massive fucking changes when I left. Instead of spunking money at the Fontainebleau in Miami on holidays and stuff like that, to tone it down a little bit. But yeah, that's one of the big things. So I always say to guys, if they're listening out there and their job's not for them, changes can be made. You don't have to tell your boss to stick it and walk out. You can make a plan and kind of moonwalk out of your job slowly if that's possible. But that's one for another podcast. But Blades, I'm going to let you moonwalk off into the distance, because I know you've got stuff to do. But I appreciate all your time. I love all your stories, and hopefully one day.
Yeah, no, I thought you were going to ask me some of my stories, and I was going to be somewhat reluctant because I don't want to incriminate anyone. But thank you for not asking me some of the stories.
That's right. Could in a court of law, but hopefully one day in the future I'll get to see you and come give you a man hug at some point.
Lovely, mate. Yeah, and lots of love to Emma. God bless you, mate.
I will pass it on. Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening. Remember to sign up to our game-changing weekly e-letter that's read by men around the world. Sign up at wholemanacademy.com/movement. Until next time.